Hey guys, today I'm taking a break from doing the walls and the insulation to do the floor. Mostly because it's quite uncomfortable working in the van, kneeling on all the ridges on the floor, even with cardboard laid on top. It's quite uncomfortable after a couple of hours. So the floor, the plan is to do the floor. It won't have its finishing top layer on. I need to get some vinyl from town, but I will be insulating between the ridges with foam insulation and laying a thermal barrier across the entire floor before laying plywood on the top. I think it's 1/2 inch ply that we're going to use, and I'm just using OSB like plywood. We used to call it shuttering ply, but like OSB board, because it's quite smooth, this board that we've got, and it's going to have vinyl on the top anyway, so you won't see it. My only concern is the finishing edge, so what we're going to do before starting is we've pulled out the original plywood that we lifted up off the floor, which was quite rotten, but we've kept it so we can use it as a template. So we're going to lay it back in the van, see where adjustments we want to make, if we want to make it longer this way or adjust it here and there, and then we can use that as a template to draw out new pieces of ply to go in once the insulation layer is down. So the plywood fits in now. It took a little bit of trimming up to get it to fit really nicely, and we've actually cut out the access point for the electrics for the fuel tank. I've seen far too many builds where people have just put a floor in. I've seen other Nissan 200s as well where they've just put a whole floor in, but if you need to access anything, you'd be taking out your entire build. So there is a piece of plywood that just drops in here, so it's all completely covered again, but it's easy to get to just by lifting up the vinyl from the front back over to access it. Well, I had to down tools the other day because the rain came in, it became really grotty, and I'm about to start on the floor again this morning, and it has just started spitting raining again. It's been like this all morning. Every time I get ready to come outside, it starts raining again. And then it's beautiful blue skies for about 10 minutes and then it rains again. So I am about to start installing insulation in the floor. The plywood is ready to go in, but I need to get the insulation down first. I'm putting more of the foam, thin foam, that I have left over from doing the walls and the ceiling, roof. I'm going to put strips of it in the hollows of my ridged floor, and then we'll be putting a thermal barrier across the entire floor before installing the plywood, the OSB plywood. But first I need to get my camera in out of this rain. Okay, so the plywood, we dry fit it and it fit nicely. We got it to fit and it has been sanded up, ready to go back in once the insulation is down. I got John to cut it out for me. I could have done it myself. It might have took me 2 days to dig the plywood out the back of the barn, behind all the junk that's in there, but I could have cut it myself, but I cracked on with my insulation whilst he did that. I remember the first time I actually used a electric jigsaw. I was 12 and I decided, well, I used to rearrange my bedroom all the time, and I moved a big freestanding wardrobe that I had across the corner of my bedroom. Took all of my clothes out, nobody was home obviously, and I cut a huge hole out the back of the board in the back of the wardrobe. It was like 2 foot wide, 3 foot tall sort of thing, and I think I put a chair in the back of there behind the wardrobe as well in the corner, and then put all my clothes back in. And I had a Narnia wardrobe. Nobody knew I'd done this for weeks. I even utilised it one day. I was playing hooky from school, and I don't remember where I'd been through the day. Probably next door. I had a young neighbour and she used to let me hang out at her house, and I I think I'd seen my dad leave the house in the afternoon, so I thought I'll go home. So I'd gone home and I'd hung out in my bedroom, and I heard him come home before it was time for me to get home from school. So I hid behind my wardrobe, and I waited till the time when I would be getting off the school bus. Well, the bus, I didn't catch a school bus, a regular bus. And I snuck down the stairs, opened and closed the front door like I was coming home from school, and just went upstairs and changed out my school uniform. So it was weeks until my dad figured out I'd cut a hole in the back of this wardrobe. So I can use power tools, but it's much easier to just, if John wants to cut the plywood out whilst I'm doing installation, then I'm happy to, you know, spread the load of it. Anyway, today I need to crack on because I really need to get this floor done. So I had plenty, I've got more than enough. This stuff is only 5mm thick. I had originally, well, I thought I'd ordered 15mm. I think 10 would be better, but I didn't read the listing properly. But in some ways it has actually worked out to my advantage. I've put this up in the roof, in the ceiling, and with it being only 5mm thick, it means there's still plenty of room for my cables to run through the underneath of the ribs of the roof. But I'll show that in my ceiling video, in my roof video. I have just put this in the low spots of the floor, just as extra insulation. I'm not putting any major insulation in my floor. If I was living in it, I would probably go a little more overboard with the floor insulation. And if it was a bigger van, I don't have like the huge head height you would have with like a high top, or even with a something like a, I don't know, the Sprinters or something like that. So I don't want to lose an extra inch of height in my van by adding insulation board underneath my plywood. So I've just filled the low spots, and now I'm going to put a layer of this stuff down before my plywood goes in. This is the reflective material you would put behind your radiators. It is foil on both sides and a thin foam in between. Not the Reflectix bubble wrap, this is foam insulation, and it is about 3mm thick. And like I said, I'll put everything, I'll link everything or the equivalent, closest equivalent I can find down in the description box. So what I'm going to do is I have a sheet of insulation board laid out on a bench in the yard here. I'm going to roll out my roll of insulation on it and lay my plywood pieces on top to mark out the shape of this stuff that I need, and then I can just cut it out. I don't think it's as wide as my van. Nope. So it will have to go in two pieces, probably just cut round it the same as the two pieces of plywood. I think it's big enough for that. And I will join the pieces together with silver tape, and I will probably stick down all around the edges with silver tape as well to hold it in position. plywood gone back in. It's not screwed down yet because I'm not sure how I'm fastening down things like the bed frame and the kitchen cabinets yet, so this leaves this available to lift up and check where there is the ribs rather than the dips and things like that if I need to screw certain things through the plywood. Probably don't need to, but the option is there currently. The cutout in the back is just over there. I'm not sure if that shows up on camera. It's looking a little lower than the rest of the floor at the moment, but once the floor is pulled down and screwed down to the bottom of the van, then, or bolted down, however we fasten it, it all levels out, so it should be hopefully fine. But I guess if it still feels like it's sitting a bit lower, I can always put a bit more of that insulation, cut in that square just to raise it up a little bit higher. I've taped all around the edges and across the centre join with silver tape. It's just 2-inch silver tape. Again, I'll put everything down below what I've used, and the plywood, the edges have been sanded up so that they're nice and rounded and not rough and things like that. So next stage will be getting back to doing my insulation and my walls, but that will be on my other videos, so I shall see you in those other videos. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.